Number 6, which is a public comment on
One
agenda
speaker
action.
this evening. I'd like to invite Mr. James Whitaker to come forward. The subject of his remarks pertain to Title I funds, SES providers, and action requested, do not approve vendors.
Thank you very much. Parent advocates for students in school request that the board strongly consider the facts before approving the Nclb SES vendors to provide tutoring services and receive payments totaling $6.3 million. 13,000 booklets were delivered to the schools. However, there's a problem. 25 of the vendors listed in the Nclb booklet have since declined to serve the students and have canceled their contractual agreement. What do these vendors know that the board doesn't know? A to Z sent an email September the 8th, 2011 to the SES office declining to serve Columbus City School students. Yet the district's enrollment summary shows 155 parents selected A to Z in-home tutoring, and A to Z is on the board's agenda tonight to be approved. Club Z in-home tutoring never even signed a contractual agreement to serve students this year. Yet 130 parents selected Club Z. 285 parents out of the 818 currently registered will now have to make a different choice. Last year, 9 vendors who are currently on the agenda to be approved by the board overcharged the district by an estimated $250,000. It needs to be determined prior to any board approval whether these 9 vendors or other SES vendors may have overcharged the district in previous years. Finally, Ms. Perkins, your statement in today's dispatch, if the investigation turns up problems with any of the 61 vendors, the board can remove them, was calloused and insensitive to the families, the children, and to the taxpayers as well. The vendor in this flyer is offering $14 an hour to any person that walks out of Walmart. They're hiring headhunters to go to the homes of our district's families to register them with their company. The vendor turns in hundreds of registration forms instead of the parent. Right now, this vendor has 327 registration forms, the most of any vendor so far. What if the problem you spoke of is that of a single mother brutally assaulted in her home because a vendor sent a complete stranger to her door, or that of a pedophile who has gained access through the trust of the family? Where does this conflict of interest lie, Ms. Perkins, that you would take such risks with the lives of our children and their families? Board policy states the board is the instrument of the community. If the board approves these vendors with an awareness of the facts before them, the board will be aiding and abetting fraudulent activity and will surely cost our district in the near future. I have for you, Ms. Perkins, Mr. Wiles, and Ms. Cambon, I have the email that we sent regarding the appropriation of these vendors for your review. You already have it in your email, but I'd like for you to have it to share with the others. And Ms. Cambon, I have something special so that we can share that.
Mr. If you could have given the information to Mr. Bell, that's appropriate.
I'll do that in the future. Well, I didn't know that. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Mr. Whitaker, for coming to speak to the board about this issue. Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Is there a second? Discussion. Mr. Wiles.
Yes, ma'am. On specifically the SES provider, the question that was brought up by Mr. Whitaker was 25 of these people have declined to do business with the district. Does the superintendent know anything of this?
I don't have that. Ms. Hackett, do you have that information? Joyce Hackett is one of our administrators and works with our supplemental education services program as well as summer school and Project Mentor.
Members of the board, we do not have information to support the allegation that 25 vendors are not going to be serving from the list that we're asking you to approve today.
The other thing is, after many emails back and forth, the district's position is that we really don't have the ability to not approve these vendors if they're on the ODE's list. Just for clarification, is that,
That's a question?
yes, are we still maintaining
Yes,
that?
that is correct. It is in federal law and federal regulation that the Ohio Department of Education has the responsibility for approving vendors for the list, and then school districts then move forward with that information.
And should we, as a board, turn down these vendors, what is the ramifications that happens after that?
Madam President, Mr. Wiles, the Supplemental Education Services Program is funded through Title I appropriation. And while I don't have an example of a school district that has failed to live up to its obligation with supplemental education services, having their funds reversed by the US DOE, we certainly know that there are situations where failure to live up to Title I regulations have cost the district some penalties with their Title I funds. So we know that that is a possibility. We also know that there may be a possibility of an audit finding. Not possibility, but reality, is that there are vendors who are on this list who are providing effective service to our students. And so if we don't approve the list, then our parents don't have access to those vendors.
Okay. With that, I would like to make a motion that we direct the superintendent to draft a letter to the ODE and lobby to reform the SES program to identify, to include allowing local districts the authority to exclude ineffective SES providers and cap fees or at least negotiate fees of the said providers. That's my motion, Madam President.
Thank you. Is there a second? Any discussion?
Yeah. I'll
First,
tell you that from the conversations with our other districts around the state that are concerned about the same thing, they believe they would like that too. But I think that conversation and advocacy should come from the board, not the superintendent. That if it's something that we want to happen, we as a board should address the Ohio Department of Education. I thought it
I
said
think
direct,
that's what he's saying.
He
He's
said
saying
direct
direct
the
us to write a letter for you.
direct the superintendent to write a letter
For you.
for us.
On our behalf.
And Madam President, if I may say also, I don't disagree with Mr. Wiles, the spirit of what he's saying. You know, I'd like to have some latitude on the things that would be included based on what we know about the law, and obviously you would need to approve that. And I also want to say to the board, you know, I think it's a right step, but that in addition to that, our legislative people, Jason Smith and our consultants, have been aggressively having this conversation. So I don't want you to think this is the first conversation, but I do believe that it's an appropriate step for the Board of Education to take also.
Mr. Baker?
Madam, my chair, my legislative agenda, and it sounds like the superintendent's already thought about that.
Any other comments?
Yes, I have one. President Perkins.
Dr.
Am I
Harris,
to understand that the federal government provides the money to individual states, and then the state creates the guidelines for vendorship for SES programs? They send their approved list down to us, and then we don't have any say-so at that point?
98% correct, Mrs. Cambon, and that is that we do have the ability to report back to the Ohio Department of Education the vendors that we feel have been ineffective. And in fact, we have done that. And in fact, in your book, we have listed this year those that Columbus City Schools has listed as ineffective. But what the Ohio Department of Education has to do is take a look at that. They may have a vendor that Columbus City Schools may list as ineffective. Another school district may have the same vendor list them as effective. So they have a set of rules that they use. They have a process that they use and a timeline that they use to determine how long they will allow those vendors to stay on that list and then take them off the list. As long as the Ohio Department of Education has them on the list, then we are obligated to share that information with, those vendors with the parents. But I think the step that we have taken under Mrs. Hackett's leadership with the book, publishing the book this year, has been a very important one. And that is, when you look through the book, you will see that we have identified those. We are communicating to our parents. With Columbus City Schools, we believe that these vendors are ineffective based on our experience. If we have no experience with them, we will say that. We have no experience with this vendor. If it's a brand-new vendor, we have no experience with the vendor. We feel that the vendor has been effective or somewhere along the effectiveness line, we say that also. So that's good information for our parents to have. It's in this book as well. This book is on our website, so parents can access it there also.
With the monitoring that Ms. Hackett's department, how many staff persons does she have that allows her to do what she needs to do? Ms. Hackett?
Joyce, how many do you have?
Board President, members of the board, Dr. Harris,
Full-time
we have teachers in the SES department. We also board our teachers out in the field extended time. So we have approximately 15 that we pay extended time hours to help with the monitoring. So 18 plus myself, 19.
Thank you.
Ms. Gross.
I have a question about the SES, but it's not related to Mr. Wells' motion. I'm wondering, I asked that question.
We're in discussion of that motion, so.
Yes.
It's not related to that motion, but it's related to something else. Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear, you're going to ask, we're going to write a letter?
Restate the motion, please.
Correct. What we're doing is, I made a motion to direct the superintendent to send a letter to the Ohio Department of Education and to lobby to reform the SES program to include local district authority to exclude ineffective SES providers and cap fees, or at least negotiate fees of said providers.
And that would go over, I think that was my original question. It would go over the board signature.
It would be our letter
Ms. Perkins?
on behalf of the board.
I just want
Yes.
to make sure I understand that. Okay.
Okay, all minds clear? Ms. Rucker, will you please call the roll on this motion?
Correct.
Ms. Gross?
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
President Perkins?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Wiles?
Yes.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Okay, now let's go back to our original motion we have on the floor in regards to the consent agenda. Are there any items for discussion?
On the SES theme, would we participate in this program if we didn't have to by law? Yeah.
No. Not as it stands.
Got it.
Ms. Gibbs?
On this list, and our internal auditor, Ms. Smith, has done some work around this area, and I just want to know, is there any information you would want to add or anything you would, before I vote, any information you want to just share with the board?
President Perkins, since the Internal Audit Office is doing a review of the SES program's internal controls, what we are looking at is the monitoring that they are doing. Is it effective? Is it identifying providers whose invoices don't support the bills that they have billed us for? As far as the registration process, the vendor application, is that robust enough to hopefully prevent some problems down the road? Are the vendors submitting the correct application to even become vendors? The work regarding the actual vendors themselves, that is being looked at by the Auditor of State. I can't really speak to their investigation because it is an ongoing fraud investigation, and they have access to, keep information confidential. As far as the vendors on this list, what we have suggested is for new vendors who we have no experience with, for that monitoring to take place much sooner in the tutoring year than later. So if there are issues, they can be addressed quicker. If there are some vendors on that list who, we have to accept because they're on the ODE list, and we've had experience where if we would have had our choice, we would not contract with them. Let's go out there sooner and more frequently. If there are vendors on that list who, year after year, we've had, positive experiences with, let's decrease, some of our efforts on those monitoring visits. So let's monitor based on the risk versus, just looking at every vendor and going out there, 3 or 4 times a year. Let's try to use our time and our dollars more effectively and do more risk-based monitoring versus let's just go to every vendor. So those were the recommendations. From speaking with SES, I do know that the vendors that we had concerns with last year, as far as the ones who we had terminated, they have been removed, so no, there are no concerns. I'm kind of hesitant because, as Ms. Perkins said, if we do run into a problem, we can come back and remove those vendors with cause. So with this list right now, with those who we don't have experience with, let's get out there much sooner and do that monitoring and try to be ahead of any issues versus getting out there later after the year has progressed and we have a vendor who's been with us for a couple of months and, we're just now getting out there doing the monitoring. So, Ms. Gibbs, that would be my response to your question.
President, I'd like to go back to Ms. Gross's question, qualify it a little bit, and my answer is still no, but still no. What I do want to say is that, there are vendors out there that are doing a credible job with our students, and so it's difficult to walk away from a situation where you know that you do have some students who are benefiting. But, there's probably a cost-benefit analysis in this thing. I mean, we have spent a lot of time on this situation and dealing with, from the Internal Auditor's Office, SES office, which is really a program office, not an audit office for the Supplemental Services Office that Joyce runs. We spent a lot of time dealing with vendors that are problematic. So that's why I was so quick to say, no, as it stands, we likely, if we didn't have to, wouldn't participate unless you told me, yes, we are going to participate because, there's students who could benefit from it. So it's a very difficult situation, but I think we've just got to have some reforms in that SES program.
And I think,
because it could be effective.
and I think a letter coming from the board, since we are the largest school district in the state, I would hope that it would have some influence on the organization that's responsible. So basically, nothing beats a failure but a try, and I think it's a good step forward. Mr. Wiles.
Thanks. Or earlier monitoring of these providers, who's going to do that?
Mr. Wiles, that monitoring would be done by the SES office. There currently are being a little bit more strategic with, when we go out there and how frequently, we monitor. We have some providers who we have rated effective for a couple of years. If nothing has changed in their operations, let's spend, more time with or who we do have a history with. And it's not been as positive as we would like versus spreading the same amount of time monitoring all providers the same way.
I forget how many people you have in your office?
Dr. Harrison, members of board, we have 3 full-time teachers, and then we pay extended time to teachers because all of this takes place outside of their workday. We have 15 or so that work on a
Is this something that you
part-time.
can do? I mean, is this a doable thing to where we can monitor more early, be on top of it faster?
We'll prioritize, Mrs. Smith suggested.
Okay. And the other thing, I would put a sticker on this, big red sticker, say buyer beware, so that parents know that they really have to do their homework on picking out these vendors. Because if we're required to give these out, and I did some numbers on these, I mean, half these vendors are either not effective or not in they're in need of improvement, severely. So, I mean, that'd be another suggestion, a big buyer beware sticker on there.
Also, if you've got a group that has been classified as the parents will notice that, as they're making their judgment. So,
Well, I agree.
I understand.
When you're looking back here in this section here, I don't really see, it doesn't jump out at me as to whether this provider is effective, ineffective, or anything. I see a whole lot of words here, and I'm going to first thing look and see, oh, they're right down the street from where I live. That's convenient, I'm going to go there. So, I mean, we can beef this up a little bit more to
found
make.
it myself earlier today, and I can't find the page. Did I flip through it?
Yeah, it's on page 8.
Yeah, but it's in the front of, yes, it's in the front of the book. And it has the list of pages 8 and 9.
Well, 9 actually has the pricing, and 8 has the, whether they're effective or not.
That's correct.
Yeah, there's a whole lot before that. And I agree with you. We've already printed this thing, so we can't really go back and put in red all the ones that are not, or whatever, but, so that it jumps out at them.
Well, let's
But-
give our parents the credit. They'll-
I'm sure they will now that we've got this, but beware.
And I was leaping through it just nicely, very nicely done.
Great.
Very nicely done. Okay.
Harrison, members of six, this was to help parents with making their choices. There's a questionnaire there for them to ask providers about their locations, how many tutoring sessions. So we put that in there to help parents make decisions about appropriate tutoring companies.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
This may be quite an elementary question about SES, but on page 7, on just number 1, it says to be eligible, you must meet all of the following criteria. And it talks about being enrolled at a school improvement school and in K-12, and you have to qualify for free or reduced price lunch. Do you have to attend that school for the entire year to be eligible?
You have to be enrolled, I would say, at the time of apply for the tutoring service, is that right? And so do you know, and maybe we need to get back, if a child withdraws during that time, goes to another school that may not be eligible, is that child still eligible?
Dr. Harrison, members of the board, no, they are not.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Wild.
I just wonder,
Other questions? Okay. Yes.
Mrs. Cantline? Are you calling the roll?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Is that where we are?
Yes, we are.
I am yes on everything except pages 45, 46, 47, and 48. And the answer to that on those pages is no.
President Perkins?
Wait, I got 45, 47, 48, and what was
I'm
that?
sorry, 45, 46, 47, and 48. I
Okay.
apologize.
Thank you. I'm a yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
yes, except no on page 32, 34, 68, 96, and the SES providers list, which I vote no.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes, except page 4, where I vote no against policy provision 10, and I abstain on page 33.
And abstain on
Page
33.
33.
Ms. Gross?
Yes, except for page 4, page 32, page 34, and page 45. And so